Okay, I found out what the problem was. I had the plane on a separate layer here. I had put it on a layer and I had it locked, so it wouldn't let me do any changes to it, and that's what happened. So I just unlocked it now and it works. You know, the Lego is casting shadows into it. So that was the problem. But anyway, if you look at the shadow of, oops, and I went into the building here. If you look at the shadow of the Lego, the shadow is fairly sharp inside. So we were able to soften the circle outside the figure. Oh, and let me go back to the attributes of the light. So I'm going to select attribute editor here and select my light on the outliner. And you can't change the type of light you're using right here on the attributes. So I was using a spotlight. Let me go back to it. I was just testing things to see why wasn't it working. But I found out why. Okay, so let's get it to what it was before. So let's give it a little bit of penumbra angle here so it's softer at the edges. Maybe bring in the cone a little bit and make the circle a lot softer so you can kind of tell what's going on here. So the circle is really soft, but the shadow inside the circle is really sharp still. So if we go to the Arnold section here, let me close a few of these windows that I opened while I was trying to solve my problem. If you, it's pretending the light is a point and casting a light here. And that matters. The size of your light matters. So if you have a point for a light, you will always have harsh shadows. And I will show you some examples later. But if I increase the radius of the light, which is just a point now, if I start increasing the radius of the light, you will see that will soften the edges of my shadow now. So that matters. I'll go back to that a little bit later with the area light. You'll be able to see it clearly. Clearly. So you have a few options here. Also, you have shadow density, aspect ratio, and lens radius. I think the one you probably want to use the most is the lens radius. And it's kind of hard to see the lens radius without any environment noise. Let me stop the render here. And actually turn off lights here. So I'm going to hit 5 to turn off lights. And these buildings are kind of on my way now. So I'm going to hide them. So I'm going to select them all and just hit Control H so I can explain the lights better to you. So it'll be kind of hard to see the light. It's just a point or really small in here. So usually if you think about a light, you either have an LED light or your headlights on the car, and the light source is really small. But then after that there is like a lens or a lamp on a post, that you have the little tiny light bulb inside, and then a piece of glass on the outside. So I can't really see that in here because there's no humidity on this scene or any kind of atmosphere. So I'm going to add a little bit of atmosphere so you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to click on render settings and bring the window over, and I'm going to open the Arnold section here and go to environment. And in environment I'm gonna add a little bit of atmosphere. So let's just create a volume. So once I click on that, Maya will create a little bit of atmosphere here. There's a link to it, but actually if you look at the attribute editor, here's the atmosphere open already, the settings for it. So I'm going to add, and this is super sensitive, so I'm going to add a tiny bit of atmosphere, and you can see, okay, now there's a little bit of fog there. I can see the light source. So right now it looks just like a point, kind of exactly like it looks in here. But if you look down here, there's a lens radius. So I can create a lens in front of that light, kind of like your light beams on your car. So see, now my light source is not a point anymore. It's kind of a lens. So if I look around it, you'll see it's kind of like a circle. Sometimes you want that. You don't want a point because that's not what you see on real life. So you can do those settings for the light, for the spotlight, and this is a pretty common light that you will be using. If you look in here, there's other lights here, And I'm going to select them from the attribute editor. It'll be a little bit quicker, you know, rather than having to go to the create menu, light. And remember, we don't want to use this light or this light. Those only render with Maya. So I looked at the point light. I'm sorry, at the spotlight. I'm going to change it to the point light here. So I'm going to go to the top of my attributes here of the light. If you don't see your attributes, remember, just click on the third icon on the top here, and change to a point light. So a point light is kind of like a light bulb. You know, if you think of a light bulb, it's sort of a sphere, and it emits light on all directions. So it's very different. It gives you a very different effect when lighting a room than a spotlight. So there's my point light. I can see all the fog around it. Let's get rid of the fog here. So I'm going to right click on atmosphere on the render settings and say break connection. And I'm just going to close the render settings. So there's my point light. It will illuminate a room just like a light bulb would, you know, and as you get farther away from it, it loses power. So same concept here. When you create it, the light will be really weak. So if you come to the Arnold section, you just give it more power and your light will be visible. Your scene will usually be like this. It's like, I put a light in there, but I can't see anything. Yeah, it's just because the light is too weak. So you just come into the Arnold section of the light and crank up the exposure, and you'll start seeing something. So the point light works like a light bulb, emits light in every direction. Again, you can change your color. Here's the last two colors I've used. If I can, I'll go back to the green. Let's change this light to an area light. So an area light is the area lights and the spotlights. I'd say they're the most commonly used. The area light looks like a square, like a small screen. You know, when you go to the photographer and he puts a light and it has that big square white screen in front of it, it diffuses the light, and that is on purpose. So if I look at the shadow this light is casting, it's similar to the spotlight, but the shadow is softer without me having to change anything. You will notice if you make the light bigger, the shadow will become softer and softer until it's almost gone. So when I went to take my pictures, like a portrait with the photographer, you know, he had a huge screen that would make all the shadows on my face go away. So, you know, that take care of wrinkles and imperfections on your screen, and that's on your skin, and that's what they use them, because this will soften everything. So if you see, the shadows now are really soft because the light's bigger. So the bigger the light source, and that's kind of what the lens was doing, or the radius was doing on the spotlight. So if I make the area light really small now, you'll see the difference here. It will kind of make my shadows harsher. If I go smaller and smaller, it'll almost look like a spotlight. See, my shadows are back to being harsh again. So how big your light source does matter as far as the area light. If you think about the sky when you go outside and it's a sunny day, you have really harsh shadows. But when it's cloudy, you know, your shadows are really soft, almost not there. It's like the perfect day to make pictures of texture. And that's because the clouds are acting like a screen. So they're diffusing the light all over the place. Okay, so that's important to remember. And important for me when I go to the photographer, if I want to hide my imperfections, just use the biggest screen you have, please. So we have area light and ambient light. We don't use spotlight. Let's see, directional light. Directional light is the opposite of wow, this is super bright. It's the opposite than a spotlight. So the spotlight loses power as it goes farther back. The directional light, it acts like the sun. So the sun is just as bright if you're here or 2 blocks down the road. You know, it will be just as bright. So it's like the light is not diffusing. So to represent that, they just make these vectors here pointing in one direction and being parallel to each other, not diffusing, kind of like the cone light does. So it preserves its power no matter how far or close you are to the light. And it doesn't matter where you put it on your scene. If I move the light around, you'll see nothing changes on my scene here. The only thing that matters is what the angle of the light is. So if I rotate it, you will see it kind of. Let me bring the intensity or the exposure down here. It's too bright. Change that ugly green to just a white color here. And it's still way too bright. So let's say something like this. So we used to use this area light, this directional light back in the day when we didn't have Arnold to represent the sun. You know, this perfectly represents the sun. It gives you the harsh shadows on a sunny day. And then the only thing you have to change is the angle of the light to represent, okay, it's noon or the sun is setting, so you just make the light a flatter angle and maybe make the light color orangey or something like that, you know, to make it look more like a sunset. So we would use this light back in the day to represent the sun. You know, we would have a setup like this, like the sun would probably be a little bit yellowish. Maybe not so yellow. Maybe like this, and then the shadows, usually when you go outside, the blue atmosphere is also acting as a screen light, so your shadows are not perfectly black. So we would have a really big screen light. So let me, an area light. So let me add an area light. It's right here somewhere. I'm going to just bring it up here and rotate it down. So we would put an area light that was as big as your scene, like this. And I can't tell if it's doing anything here. So usually if you want to see what the light's doing, I change the color and I make it really bright and ugly so I can tell what the light's doing. I don't see any pink in here, so it's not really doing anything. So again, the light's too weak. I just need to give it exposure here. I'm just gonna type 10 in here, and now I can see, oh, that light's doing something. So I can bring it down a little bit and maybe change the color. So usually the sky is blue, so I'm going to make the light blue. And now this light, the area light, would illuminate your shadows, so they're not perfectly black, but they have a hint of blue on them, kind of like on a bright day. You know, you go outside. I'm gonna give it a little more power here. So now my shadows are not perfectly black, but a little bit bluish. You know, this is kind of like the regular setup for a sunny day back in the day. So that's all the lights from Maya. Now when Arnold, it brought its own fancy lights. So instead of using this setup, which are kind of faking what an atmosphere does, Arnold brought its own lights in here. So if you go to the Arnold's menu here, you will see area light, which is basically the same than the Maya light area light. So I'm not going to show it to you because it's exactly the same. The only difference is that it has the exposure section right here, because this is an Arnold light, so it doesn't have an Arnold section down here. Everything's up here on the top. So I'm just going to change this light, or I'm just going to delete it actually. So if you go to Arnold lights, there is a physical sky here that which represents the sky, like the sun, and it has a few advantages here. So it's calculating here, and if I look around, or if I look farther away from my scene, you'll see it put a sphere all around my scene. So it's representing a round atmosphere, which is more kind of like the Earth, and it is an Arnold light. So the exposure section is right here on the top section. So I can increase the exposure here, but by default it's a fairly good exposure. So I'm just going to leave it how it was. But there's a few more options with this light. If you look on the physical sky tab here, you will see turbidity, and let me just show you here the sky. So It has the other advantage of it that is that half the sphere or the bottom part is kind of like a ground color that reflects up on the sky. So if you had, let's say you go to the Caribbean, for example, and you want the ground like the ground to be like a greenish jungly color, let's say. Uh, some color like this, like a dark green, the sky kind of takes on a little bit of that color. But by default, it's gray. So let's go back to gray. I think it was something like this. Yeah, something like that. So the sky will, pick up some of the color that's reflecting up from the ground. So the first section, though, is turbidity. So if you think about a clear day right after it rains, you will have almost not turbidity in the air. It's be super clear. So this is like a sunny day after it snowed or rained. The sky is really clean. And then if you increase the turbidity, this is like a inversion day on Salt Lake, after no wind or the smog is all accumulated. One of those gross days. So, but by default set to 3. So that's kind of like a normal day. Then elevation is the elevation of the sun on the sky. So right now it's set to 45 degrees. If you think about the sun being at noon, that would probably be, that would be 90 degrees. So now the sun is right above my model. The shadow is really small. I can't even see it. But the sun is coming from above. So the nice thing is I don't have to adjust the light here. So if I start decreasing the angle here, you'll see the shadow get longer. And it takes the color of the atmosphere by itself. So it starts turning orangey, reddish, by itself. So if I want to represent the sunset, I don't have to change the colors on the lights. This physical sky will do it by itself. So let's set it back to 45. Actually, let's leave it down there so we can see something here. So also there's a direction of the sky, where the sun is on the sky. And it looks like it's coming from the front. So the sun is somewhere behind here on the right side of the screen. And the shadow is going that way. But right here, that's the azimuth. So you can change where the sun is on the sky. And if I move it far enough, you'll see the sun show up here behind the screen. I guess it won't let me. Let's see. I gotta go the other way. Okay, so I'm starting to see the sun here. I guess it needs to be lower. Lower elevation here. Maybe bring it up closer. Where is the sun? Let me look around here. So I have to move my scene over here. There it is. So there's the sun. It's this tiny little dot in the sky. It's white. It's not very renderable. It doesn't look that great to put it as a background image. It's better to put a picture. But I can kind of move it around with the azimuth. So if I rotate it, you can see it moving. The intensity is obviously how bright it is. I'm just gonna bring this back to 45 degrees and bring the intensity down here. It's super bright. I don't remember doing that, but I guess I did mess with it. Then the sky tint. If you had a scene that's in Jupiter, I guess you could make a green sky, or Mars. It could be red. You could make your sky red. You can tint the sun even. Let's say the sun is green. And you would see, if I look around, you probably see that dot in the sky that's green. Or somewhat green. Where'd it go? Well, let's bring it back to default here. Let's just make it white again. And then the sun size is just that little tiny dot. You can make it bigger. But it really is not that great for rendering. It doesn't look that great. It's usually I just use the lighting for it, and I don't use the image that's giving me on the back. So how can you use the light and not see this sphere on the back? You go to, let's see, where is that? you go to here to the sky dome shape section, and then on camera, you turn off the slider for the camera. That will prevent it from rendering. So you will only see the light affecting your scene, but not the dome rendering. Now we have another light, so let me just delete this one. On Arnold, we'll go to lights. We'll use the sky dome. So the sky dome is kind of the same concept than the physical sky. It's just a round sphere, but this one's white. So you probably seen renders like this where somebody's trying to show off their model, and it has this really even soft shadow rendering that looks kind of like this. That's because they're using the physical sky. So I'm sorry, the sky dome. So you can light a scene with the sky dome like this just to show off your modeling, or you can put an image on your sky dome. It's typically called an HDRI image. So how do I put an image on the sky dome? You go to the color section of it and click on the checker box. And when you click on the checker box, this window will show up and ask you, what do you want to put on this sky dome? I want to put a file on it. And now I have my color section changes to where is that file. So if I click on the folder here, I can go find my file. I have on my computer, I have a section here with textures. So I know I have some skies in here. Let's see, or HDRI sky. So they're usually high definition images. So there you can see it's 8K or something like that. So we're gonna do this. The sky is on fire picture, and I'm going to load it. It kind of gives you a preview here of what it looks like. It's a huge image and it's round, so I'm going to open it. Now my scene will be lighted with that picture, and it's gonna take a minute here to refresh. I should probably stop the render because those images are huge. But this is used a lot in movies, so they'll take an HDRI picture of the scene, and light your 3D objects so it looks like it's on that scene also. So I'm going to hit play here and then wait for it to render. See, now my model is picking up the colors of the HDRI picture. So this is a great way to make your model seem like he's on this scene. So if I kind of get rid of the plane here and I kind of just see the model, he kind of looks like he's on that environment on the around these buildings, because it's picking up all the colors from the scene, colors of the shadow, and this is used a lot in movies, so it's a good light to know. Okay, now I think we have the last light. So we looked at area light, sky dome, mesh light. So let's say you want something to emit light. So let's say you have a lightsaber. So let me just make a cone here. I still have I still have interactive creation turned on. I should probably turn it off. So I'm going to go create polygon primitives and turn off interactive creation. So let's say I have a light or a gem that I want to emit light. I can do that by making this a mesh light. So I'm going to go back to my Arnold here, select lights, and convert it to a mesh light. Now this object is turned into a light, and if I open back the Arnold render view, you will see that object is emitting light, and it's not very bright. So I'm going to increase the exposure here. So now it's emitting light, but I only see the bottom of it. So, and I don't see the tube either. If you look at the attributes, there's a section here to make the light visible. So right now it's invisible. If I click on it, now my light is visible. So I have this cylinder emitting light. If I bring back an atmosphere here, let's just do it so we can see it better. Atmosphere. And give it a little bit of density. I can see my light there, emitting light on all directions, and then if I select it, you know, to go to its attributes, I can change the color of the light to make it any color I want. So that's a mesh light. Now we also have we have a photometric light. So a photometric light is exactly like a spotlight, but the difference is that this spotlight has a fancy pattern inside of the cone. So if you look in here, it's not doing anything on my scene. It's just not, even if I increase the intensity, it's not making any changes on my scene. That is because it's looking for a file. So it's asking you what kind of photometry light you want. And I don't have any right now here. But if you go online, let me just open a window here. Firefox. And you look for photometric light Arnold. There's a bunch of patterns you will see, and let me look at the images here. So here's the Arnold photometric light. So maybe if you have designed a kitchen or you design an interior room, you probably seen this on the store. So the cone lights will have different patterns on it. Like this cone has it's just one bright light. This one I can see clearly two cones, and that's probably because the light has lenses on it. This just looks like a bright sign on the top. So these are things that my wife looks like when she wants to redesign the kitchen. You know, I didn't pay much attention to them. It's just a light to me, but they have a different look to them. You know, so you can download this pattern and put them on your light, and it will look just like this pattern that you're seeing here. So you could go to the Arnold photometric light here, and you can download them. I think they're listed here, and add it to your light. So here it is. Examples IES profile can be downloaded here, and when you download them, they have the same numbers than this image. You just put it on that section that we saw in here, and your light will have that look. It won't be just a plain old spotlight. It will have the fancy cones inside of it. So that is all about lights. You just have to think now about what do you want your scene to look like. Do you want it to look happy and bright? So you could probably use a physical sky. If you want it to look mysterious and dark, you would probably use less powerful lights, maybe some area lights and spotlights to bright some things and make other things be dark. So think about the scene, look at your concept art and what mood you're trying to convey or communicate with your lighting. And that's all about lights.